Hello, this is Chris Pope with Deeper Root Spiritual Ministries. So glad you could join me today. We're in the book of Job, lesson number 11. God speaks. Now to Job. And we're in Job chapter 38, verses 1 through 11. You know, it's amazing building a house. My wife has always been in the building business for years and years, knows tremendous amounts about it. And I always ask if they're doing something on a show or whatever, why are they doing that and why it looks that way and what all goes into it. Just all that goes into building a house from the ground up is just amazing. There's so many steps to it, and you have to know what you're doing and everything else. And, you know, here we talk about, we speak from God's perspective. He created the world and he didn't have building blocks. Like I've said before, he had to create the periodic table. He had to create all the laws of physics, how they work, how they join together, how they're molded and shaped together, and how it all works to the nth degree. God had to do all this just out of nothingness. And it's so beautiful because we get down to Job chapter 38, and here, you know, Job's friends, Job has tragedy. Job speaks. His friends have back and forth. Again, it's the why. And then Elihu talks about the who. And then finally, God speaks in chapter 38. And I do believe that all four men heard what God said. And I don't know if Job's wife was there or not and heard it, but I believe all four of the men heard what God said. And I think that's important to realize that God is not limiting. He's not afraid to speak for himself. You know, he's not going to sit back and say, I'm not going to say anything. He's actually deciding to speak here. And, you know, personally, I wish that even in the Old Testament, the words were written in red when God speaks, because it makes them more beautiful. But it's so beautiful, this context is. So verses 1 and 2 says this: Then the Lord answered Job in the whirlwind and said, Who is this who darkens the divine plan by the words without knowledge? Now, again, God is speaking, and I've said there's the why in the first of Job, and then Elihu is really doing the conversion there of, let's think about from God's perspective, and then God speaks. And what do you say? Who is this? I mean, what are you talking about? God's basically saying, okay, you're saying this, Job. Your friends are saying what they're saying. Even Elihu is saying what he's saying, but I'm God. I'm the who we're talking about here. Let's get down to brass tacks. Let's lay all the cards on the table. And without the knowledge of God, how can you talk about these things? How can you speak to me and say the why, or what effects it has, or it's unfair, or I shouldn't have been born? All these things that we lay upon layer upon layer, and God's right here, and he begins to speak. And it's so beautiful what God says. And he goes into verses 3 and 5, and it says this: Now who tightened the belt on the waist of man like a man? And I ask you, shall you inform me, God, where were you when the foundations of the earth were laid? Tell me if you have understanding. Who set the measurements? Since you know, who stretched out the measure over the earth? Who did it? Where were you? You know, what have you done? Because, you know, stand up like a man. Be a man, Job. Be a man, Elihu. Be a man, the three friends. And inform God. Where were the foundations of the earth laid? Tell me if you have the understanding. Who set the measurements? Since you know, or who stretched out the measure line over it? Again, the laws of physics, the complexity of that, the complexity of molecular structure itself is mind-boggling when you think about it. When you take elements and you combine them together, you make other materials out of it. And the depth of understanding God in creating it all, it blows my mind. And there's times I question God about something, and here I am. I'm sitting in the pew with Job. What do we say? Because we have no answers. We have no way of responding to God because we weren't there when he created all things. We weren't there when he laid it out. We weren't there, and we don't even have the knowledge today to understand even how to advise God how to do anything. It's so complex. And it says in verse 6 and 7, it says this again, what is the basis shrunk? Or who laid its cornerstones? Or when the morning star sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy? Were you here when the angels were singing? When they saw creation, they said, the Lord, wow, look what you've done, Lord, and look how it all works, and look at the complexity. He had to create, I believe, the angels. He had to create the earth. He had to create everything about everything, and the sons of God were overwhelmed. Again, these are angels, and they're the sons of God, and they say, wow, they shouted for joy when it was done because of the complexity and the understanding what God did is incomprehensible for us, even at the study of science. Again, the word science actually means the study of. We study these things, but we didn't create them. And the creator is speaking and saying to all of us, okay, I'm God because I'm the who that everybody's been talking about, but let me speak. And it says in verse 8 through 10, it says this, or who enclosed the sea by the doors, and when it came out of the womb, when it burst forth and made the clouds a garment, and the thick clouds to swallow the bands, and placed the boundaries and set bolts in the doors, and said, this is as far as the point you shall come, and no further. Hear, you proud waves, and stop. Who created all the boundaries? Who did all this? Who made, even, when you see creation itself and its depth, its height, its complexity. I mean, to see just water, for instance, and as it comes upon the earth and comes up from the ground, and then it evaporates and goes into the clouds and comes back down again, and then it goes to the earth and it's filtered and purified and comes back on the other end and it's healthier, and the complexity of all of that. And we can sit here and say, well, we understand it. But you're studying it. You're not creating it from nothing. And that's what God is saying. I did this. And I'm the who that the book of Job is talking about. And now I'm going to speak because I set boundaries on things. Absolutely. I know what I'm doing. And see, that's the thing about, we look at God and we say, God, we don't understand why we're going through the things we're going through. And we feel like we're being punished, or, demons attack us and we're hurt and we're offended. And yet God breathed life into us and gave us life in the first place. Without him, we wouldn't exist. And I've said before, even before the conversation starts, the conversation except in it of itself is so little to God. Because when we look at the who we're dealing with, God, then it lessens the why we go through the world and the attacks and the problems and the issues that we have. And it's the God in whom we deal with. Because at the end of the day, and I've said it often, and I've heard it preached often, there's nothing that follows a hearse because there's no reason to. There's no bags of money, or there's no things. Life is just life. And when you're done, you're done. And there's nothing you take with you. It's empty. And to realize that, and to realize that our life is brief and short on this planet. And as we choose to go to heaven or to hell, that's up to us. That's our life choice. We choose our direction. And God allows us to choose because he loves us. He is all powerful. He is God Almighty. There is no other. Be careful when you tell God what he's supposed to do. Again, I go back to the surgeon illustration. We tell God like a surgeon what to do, or our doctors or the pharmacist. That's not our job. We might be in the healthcare field, but we're not in charge. Ultimately, God is. In the spiritual realm, God is way up here and we're not there. Even though God came down to our level to be one of us, we need to recognize that and stay in that form to where our lane, who we are. Because when we're talking about the who that did all things, it's amazing and unbelievable what he did. And part of this is really trusting him at the end of the day. Whatever we go through, we need to trust in the God in whom we serve. That's all we can do at the end. Remember, God does love us all, truly loves us all. This is Chris Pope. God bless.